so many new areas of law too.
We're just signing these.
Good evening. I will now call to order the Monday, February 5th, 2024 regular town council meeting. If you would please stand and join me in a pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Up first on the agenda is the approval of a memorandum of the January 16, 2024 regular meeting. A copy has been posted. Are there any questions from councilors?
No. I move to approve the minutes of the memorandum of the meeting of January 16th.
First from Councilor Sampson.
Second.
A second from Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is the approval of January payroll claims. Are there any questions from councilors? I'll make a motion to approve claims.
Second.
A second from Councilor Melton. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next would be the approval of the February 5th, 2024 claims. Any questions from councilors?
I have questions. This kind of goes back to the original meeting where I asked at what point I'm going to be aware of what I'm looking at versus what is expected. And I know that sometimes when we have, so yeah, Cindy, come on up, thank you. Sometimes when we have capital expenses and expenditures, I'm not sure if we were prepared to fund them in this early part of the year, if that is something that's normal for the town to, once it's approved, front load everything in the year, or also what we approved. I don't have, am I supposed to be finding that number somewhere when I see the Durangos come through or I see the body cams come through? They're large amounts and I think they're totally needed, so there's no question about that, but
Right.
did we find them in budget?
And they were in the budget. Now, with this being February, normal time frame of closing out a year is about mid-February, which we are on target to do. So once we close out, then we can start pulling 2024 reports so you can see where we are to budget, et cetera. We just don't have it right now until we close out 2023.
I wondered that, if you had to wait to
Yes.
close the 23
Yes.
to get the 24 rolling. Okay. And then also I saw in this February 5th claims that we had the listed Barnes and Thornburg retainer amount for December and January. Is that normal that you would have 2 months at once? Was there something
It
didn't
just,
hit the
those come
before?
through email, and sometimes it just doesn't get caught or it doesn't come through. So no, it's not always the way it's done. It just happened that's when it came through this time.
Okay. And then another thing I thought that, okay, so then maybe this plays along with that too, the beam longest NEF. I was under the impression there was more of an internal takeover of that engineering, or is that we still use them on a consulting basis, or is that just for 2023? And I don't know who I'm asking. I see a lot of eyes look in my direction, so I don't know. You want to talk?
I'm going to let Mike answer the question.
Okay. Yeah, I saw at least 3 or 4 of you looking like you'd be willing to answer my question.
Good evening, Mike Dale, Planning and Building Department. Right, we're supposed to be phasing out the use of beam longest and NEF. I've told my staff that we need to wean ourselves off BLN. We still have a budget for paying them for services this year, but we're actively working towards doing the work that they're doing in-house.
Okay, great. I mean, it was a substantial amount, so it caught my eye.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Another question I had, I'm sorry, you guys, you know I ask a lot of questions, but I am wondering about road salt. Do we store road salt? Do we get it prior? And I saw it hit 3 different times, adding up to about, $50,000 or $40,000. I'm totally rounding a number there, and I didn't know what our process was for that when it would hit the budget.
We have a salt facility that stores about 450 tons. The average season for us takes anywhere from 800 to 1,500 tons. We are constantly cycling salt and replenishing our supplies throughout the winter.
Okay. So I would assume it's normal for it to hit in January and February, and then we're able to just
Yeah, usually you'll see claims all throughout the winter season.
Right, but we
until it's
store
over.
what's left over? I didn't
Correct.
know, okay.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. And then the final thing I noticed was that we're still paying legal fees for Styron versus Town, and I'm just wondering how that wraps up.
Those were a couple items that were still left over from Barnes and Thornburg. So that should be it.
We wrapped up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had a question about that same thing. So just to tag along to that, those two claims, were those kind of dragging along with the fire chief stuff?
Yeah, that's
Perfect.
exactly
That's what I thought it
correct.
was. Perfect. Thank you.
Were you closing out like the settlement process?
Yes, exactly. So, yes, so those specific items were for my partner's time, Mark Cranley, for closing out the fire chief settlement
Makes sense.
related to the
Great.
underlying lawsuit. We just didn't have a separate matter, it was all catch-all.
All right, and then one last one, because I just noticed I didn't ask this one. For food and beverage tax, when we're giving $60,000, is that a collect, it said for an agreement? Is that, did I read that right?
For Boone
I thought
County
it was-
EDC.
Yeah, food and beverage. Oh, I'm gonna
believe that's
not
what it-
have it written
yeah.
down. I'm sorry.
It was Boone County EDC.
282, 60,000?
Yeah, we voted on that last meeting
Right.
to donate that or to give that to the say it again.
Boone County
Boone EDC.
Boone EDC.
Yes.
yes.
Economic
Boone County,
Development Corporation,
yeah.
So
that was the
that was
additional
the, okay.
appropriation.
I just didn't see it marked as where it was going, so I wasn't remembering that would be already hitting the budget from last time.
Yeah, so you'll often see those bigger amounts, like tonight we have two, just for the new counselors, like tonight we have 2 additional appropriations. Then you'll see those claims come through on your next claim sheet, because once they're approved by the council to
Okay.
appropriate the money, then the claim will actually be invoiced and paid. And it
Okay.
will show up here for your approval and then actually remit it out to
Right.
whoever received it.
Okay, and the EDC is collecting like once a year, so they're collecting all up.
Correct.
In
It's a-
January.
it's a
Okay,
single fee.
great. Thank you for your patience with my questions.
Great questions.
Are there any other questions on claims?
Motion to approve.
I got a first from Counselor Melton. Second from Counselor McElderry. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next, we have the request to speak on agenda items. Amy, did you get any additional requests?
No, I believe you have everything there.
Okay, so I have 4 requests to speak. And you will have, each one of you, I'll call your name up here, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. If you would, please, when you come up, just state your name, your address. Like I said, you'll get 3 minutes. I've got 2 timers up here. The timer will go off at 2 minutes, which means you got 1 left. I'll hold up a finger so you know, and then, we'll move on from there. So please be respectful of the 3-minute time frame. And first one up is Mark Adams.
Just pulling up my notes here. Forgive me, the first time speaking to the town council, so I address Jason and the council. My name is Mark Adams. I am at 6670 Regents Park Drive, and that is in the Stonegate neighborhood. And I am speaking, I put in a request to speak on the agenda item 9A, which is around the Atwater rezoning ordinance. Is that clear? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I am in opposition to that request. I wish the council to vote against that request. When purchasing my home in Stonegate in 2011, I had a reasonable expectation that the adjoining property to the neighborhood would remain at least a residential in the R3 rural residential, and that is a single family and 2 family residential development, and ranges from 1.0 0.75 homes to 3 homes per acre. And I had a reasonable expectation when purchasing my home that would remain. There are some professional businesses in the front, and there were when I purchased my home. Those were like dentist offices and a gym, and slowly trickled in more businesses. And I expect more of that in the zoned area as a professional business. What I didn't expect is a 900 unit storage facility that is that was described as approximately, I believe, it was 90,000 square feet on the 10-acre parcel in question. I didn't expect that, and I think that's a unreasonable expectation to deal with.
One more minute.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. The issue is that type of business will bring down property values and is undesirable for homeowners, and the adjoining property that doesn't just affect the adjoining properties, it affects everyone. We have a line of sight. We see it every day. We're going to encounter increased traffic patterns. Some of the things addressed, and I think wrongly, are the direction of traffic flow, right turn only out, right turn in. I think those people will just go right in our neighborhood and out. There were some other things about downward lighting. Downward lighting does not does not make things invisible. Trees, whatever. It does not make the land, does not make this large 900 unit thing invisible.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Up next, we have John Casey.
My name is John Casey. I live at 7597 West Stonegate Drive in Zionsville, not very far from the proposed project. And I will tell you, council members, that I cannot overstate the benefits this project will have to Stonegate. Again, I'll say that again. I cannot overstate the value this project will have to the Stonegate development. I was on the original elected POA board. I've served 5 years on the board, 4 years as president. I've dealt with every conceivable problem that our developers left us, and this is the last one. So if this is approved, we will finally own all of pond number 3, which is one of our major retention ponds that is now not owned by the subdivision. If this is approved, we will own all of our shoreline. They own probably about 20% of that pond shoreline. If this is approved, the boundary on our section 8, which is our cottage neighborhood, will be straightened out. As it is right now, there are several homes at our cottages. They can't even walk from their backyards to the pond without going over private property. Those were all problems that were left over by our developer. Why? Because of zoning proceedings where they represented that property would be incorporated into Stonegate. So in 2019, 2020, the developers deeded over the common areas. In the spring of 2020, we got a letter from the Wright family.
1 minute.
Don't trespass on our lake. No Stonegate residents on our shoreline. They put up no trespassing signs right at the backyards of a couple of people. That's what we dealt with. When John and Bo and the other investors bought the property after talking with us, first thing they told us is, okay, informally, go ahead and take care of that. That's what we've been operating on now, an informal agreement. One last thing, before the developers turned over the property, they left us another gift. They granted an easement over our common property, common areas, to give themselves access to this property through our neighborhood. The applicant has agreed that that easement will be limited to an emergency gated easement. I just say again that you cannot overestimate or overstate the value this will have to our neighborhood.
Thank you, John. Up next is Justin Wagner.
Everybody. My name is Justin Wagner. I live at 6739 Johns Station. I am the current Property Owners Association president. I came in just at a time that John was actually rolling out. I was the vice president last year, and I'm the president this year. So I've heard a lot about basically the different properties that have caused this issue. This one probably being the one that's most front and center. And the reason I say that is that we all have always known within our board that this property is going to be developed. What we didn't know is what would be the resultant of that development as we go along. So it's always going to be the position, regardless of what comes about with this development, that we are going to try to work with the developer to try to make it the best case scenario for us. So with that, I am definitely here to say in representation of the board, to say they have worked with us. They have addressed what our concerns were, that when we reached out to our community members of, you know, we really, I mean, obviously we're caring for 365 families here, not just a couple of us, right? So I have my own position. I live in the community. I have 4 kids that go to the schools there. So we always are very in tune with what are going to be the issues of that. I would say there was 3 main issues that we had from that. One was line of sight, which was brought to you before. The other one is separation. We did not want it to be part of the Stonegate community. We made that very adamant. They've addressed that. The separation line of sight, obviously they've addressed that with all the different plantings and things of that sort. So we do feel that that's good. As well as probably the biggest issue is the pond, right? I mean, I know I have a maintenance and operations background in my federal time, so I know how painful it can be when you don't have full control of something. This obviously, if approved, will give us that full control, as what John said. So again, I'm in the same position. I feel that those 3 items alone are enough for me and my POA board to approve this as well on our notion, or basically to say that we support it. So that is basically me saying they've satisfied our concerns, and therefore I feel like, you know, from the overarching our entire community, I would say that we do all support it. As a community, there's always going to be some that adamantly support it, some that adamantly are against it. And I understand it depends on where you are in your position and where you live. But hopefully, as they present it, it'll be seen for those that basically have a negative thought on it, that there is some positive light to this, and there is a way that this can be good for all of us in the end. But that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Arthur Johnson.
Good evening. My name's Arthur Johnson. I live at 6732 West Stonegate Drive. I'm here on behalf of myself, my wife, Kristen, and my 8-year-old daughter, Katie. And I am here in opposition to this proposed development. The question isn't whether some other development may be worse or whether the developer worked with our homeowners association. Regardless of whether that homeowners association worked well with the rest of the community or not, that's not here to be discussed tonight. The question is whether or not this facility is good for Stonegate and is good for Zionsville. And what I can tell you is that I am the only individual who actually researched and got expert opinion on this particular topic. In regards to safety, the petitioner states in their proposed findings of fact to the commission that the proposed use will not be injurious to public health, safety, comfort, community moral standards, convenience, or general welfare. What I can tell you looking at news stories in Indianapolis is that's not the case when a storage facility moves in. There's a WRTV Indianapolis article entitled "People Living in Storage Units? Marion County Public Health Department is investigating, and what they discovered is there were break-ins. There was another article from Fox 59 News dated December 11th, 2023, entitled "Customers Fed Up After More Than 40 Burglaries Reported at Indy Storage Facility." Those problems don't just lie in Indianapolis. The problems lie with the facility that was brought in. It's an opportunity for those who wish to create and cause crime in our community to hit an easy target. They're only open certain hours. They don't have staff there the entire time. And so what do folks do? They jump the wall and run and steal. The other thing that I would present, and it was included in my letter, and I have copies here tonight for each of you, is the impact that it will have on home values. I'm the only one who actually retained a real estate expert in the residential real estate field to comment on whether or not this would adversely impact our home values. And her opinion? Absolutely, because it's an unchangeable factor. It's a two-story building that the folks across the street from me will be able to see a brick wall on that second story. There's nothing they can do about it. They can't landscape it. It is. And that unchangeable factor decreases home values. I live across the street. My home value will decrease because those are my comps. I moved to Zionsville and Stonegate for the community and the safety it provided.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you very much.
I ask that the council
Arthur, thank
rule
you,
in
Arthur. I
objection
appreciate it.
to-
Thank you. Appreciate your input. All right, up next on the agenda is the mayor administration update. Mayor Stair with us this evening. Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening, councilors. Good to see you all tonight. The first thing I'm going to do is go through our stated priorities for 2024 and just give you a brief update on each one. The first priority is obviously finances, and our finance committee will be meeting again later this week, and I can tell you now that we are on pace to close out the books on 2023. We will be done with that on schedule this month. We have moved to the point we are no longer accepting cash payments in Town Hall or at any of our remote locations. We are working with legal counsel to ensure that we are in compliance with the best practices as dictated by the State Board of Accounts on that. And also, I spoke today with our town court judge, Samantha Spencer, and the town court has also agreed to no longer accept cash payments here in Town Hall for ordinance violations or infractions. They have been doing so up until now, and we will take a look at that in 12 months and reevaluate if that is a good thing to do going forward. But for now, there will be no more cash payments accepted by the town court. South Village, we have increased interest in Creekside, which is very good news. I wish I could be more specific. I'm sorry, but as that information comes in and as that is able to be released, we will certainly speak to you about that and speak to the public about that. We're also gathering data from the engineering study on rerouting Zionsville Road into town, and we will also share with you more on that when that becomes available. Digitization and cybersecurity. This work begins with our network replacement project, and that is replacing the switches across our entire network. And this is something that's going to be funded by the ARPA money. This was the previous council was the one that authorized this money. The hardware that we need is now on site, and we are prioritizing the process so we can continue operations as normal as the upgrades are carried out. And this is a big item here, the comprehensive plan. The RFQ for the comprehensive plan was posted on January 26th. We will answer questions for applicants and accept proposals electronically now up until February 16th. And at that point, a committee will be formed to narrow down the applicants, and we will have a short list by March 1st. And of course, we will be asking for council involvement in that process as that goes forward. Any questions on those priority updates? All right, then we will move on with the updates that we have. And the first update is speaking about an in-house general counsel. It has become apparent to me in the last few months that we need an in-house attorney to provide legal advice and services across all of our departments. Our department heads looking for a legal opinion need a resource that is in the building, that is accessible to them, rather than through a phone call when they often have to wait hours or sometimes even days to get the answers. Now, in the past few years, the council has had an attorney on retainer, and the administration has had another attorney on retainer, and it has been a very expensive way, I think, to manage our legal needs. Since the beginning of the year, the administration has used Heather and Barnes & Thornburg as our legal counsel, and we have been getting good advice. No complaints about that, but I think the process has been slowed by logistics. So in consultation with Heather and with council leadership, we have sought people to fill the role as in-house attorney. We have several quality candidates for that role. In our 2024 administration budget, we have a line item for legal which anticipates having an attorney on retainer at $15,000 a month. So that line item is for $180,000 a year. We have spent some of that so far this year using Heather and some of her colleagues at Barnes & Thornburg as our legal counsel. But I come to you tonight to ask for an amendment to the salary ordinance to bring in a full-time in-house attorney in the amount of $24,609.48, which will cover salary and benefits. Now, I'll stop right there because I know that you may have some questions on how we get to that amount, and I'd be happy to share with you any answers to questions you might have.
What was that amount?
The amount is $244,609.48. And I'll tell you how we get there. Yes?
This is going to be an agenda item later. Should we?
Yeah, we've got this on the agenda. Can we go?
Okay.
Yeah, can we go through that in the later?
You want to talk about it later then?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
That's when I'd prepared to.
Okay, that's great. Well, this is part of a larger salary ordinance amendment that is before you tonight. And it also includes a couple of other items. The first is changing the classification of Tiffany Diefendorfer to Police Department Administrative Manager, and that is due to structural changes brought on by bringing the department's admin back to ZPD from what was formerly the MAC. And also making a new classification for Welcome Center Coordinator. That's a job that has not existed up to this point, and we do have Bonnie Black, who will be soon stepping into that role. Now, these two additional amendment requests do not require any additional funding. They are simply to reflect the realignment that's taken place in those two departments. And while I do understand that suspending the rules by council is a big ask, but I want to reiterate that the need for a general counsel is really critical to us and urgent in keeping the business of the town moving forward. So with that in mind, I will respectfully ask you later to consider suspending the rules and making immediate action on all three of those salary ordinance amendment requests. Moving on then, and again, we'll talk more about that later. If anybody has any questions now, I'll be happy to answer them. But if you want to wait till later, I'm good with that too. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's probably best to do it in the meeting.
Okay, great. Next item is Alexa Ling. She is our new administrative assistant, and she will be a very important conduit of information between the council and the administration, as well as the council and town departments. So, Alexa, why don't you stand up and say hello? I encourage you, I know some of you have already met Alexa. She's very organized, very competent, and very interested in making sure that you have the information you need when you need it, and I would encourage you all to get to know her as time goes forward here, and I've encouraged her to reach out to all of you as well. The next item, thank you, Alexa. The next item is the golf course RFP. This is a request for proposal for a private operator to run our golf course. That went out today, and we are accepting applications up until February 23rd. We will be putting together a selection committee to narrow down the proposals. And of course, we will ask for participation from the council. In fact, we're going to ask for 2 members from the council. We're also going to have a couple of representatives from the Parks Board and the administration. And we are going to narrow down the proposals that we get, and we will decide at that point whether or not to enter in a lease operator agreement. And we'll certainly seek the advice of the full council before we do anything in that regard. All right, the next item that I have is new police department signage. Chief Spears and Lance of our Department of Public Works are working together on signage to show people the way to our police department now that the police department is open to the public once again. This will be in addition, oh, this is nice, to the new wayfinding signs that you'll see later this year. There are going to be 12 of these strategically placed around town. So what you see right here and what you see on your screens there is a prototype. And the arrow at the bottom can point left, or it can point right, or it can point straight. So that's why that is separate from the signage itself. Now, the chief has been a good steward of his funding. He has arranged it so that the sign initiative can be handled within the existing budget. That makes it budget neutral, and I know we all like to hear that. So again, I wanted you to see these prototypes, wanted you to see these signs before they start popping up around town. Yeah, there's a larger version as well. And just a side note, Lance was very pleased during this process to see that these signs include a high-intensity prismatic lens sheeting, which will make sure they look great for the next 10 years. So
aren't we all?
We're very excited about that. All right, the next item that we have is an easement for an Aldi store and a Crew car wash in the area that's out adjacent to Whitestown in the Anson area. And Mike Dale is here to speak about that.
Thank you, John. At the July 17th, 2023 Plan Commission meeting, the Plan Commission approved a development plan for the Crew car wash, and also last year for an Aldi grocery store at about 6419 East Whitestown Parkway, about 4 miles west of us on Oak or Whitestown Parkway. But as a condition of approval, the Plan Commission required the recording of an access easement agreement, which you have, I believe, in your packets this morning. The project involves an 8.1 acre site in the town's rural general business or GB zoning district and within the town's I-65 corridor overlay district. The owner of the property, C&V Farm LLC, is requesting the town's signature on the private access easement agreement to ensure that the general public and that public utilities have unfettered access to both the Aldi grocery store and the Crew car wash sites that are currently approved for construction at that location. The access drive would be constructed to the town's street standards, and Crew car wash would be responsible for maintenance of that private drive. As an introduction, I'll hand it off to C&V. Are they here? Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Mike? All right. And then I have one final note tonight. And this is something that is going to be new for the administration update. I want to make sure that the partnership between the town council and the town departments is based on proper communication. So I'm going to be proposing a monthly update from our economic development coordinator, Corey Sharp. This is a way to inform the public as well. So to that end, I will be bringing her to the first council meeting of each month for a brief 5 minutes or less, usually, presentation. So, Corey?
5 minutes. Good evening, councilors. My name's Corey Sharp. Before I dive into the Redevelopment Commission update, I wanted to share just a little bit about me, because as I am getting more and more opportunities to meet with residents and organizations in the community, I'm realizing that they don't understand my background. So I have been in business for an undisclosed amount of time. So I am a registered landscape architect here in the state. I'm also a certified urban planner. And over my career, I have focused my energy on campus planning, town planning, neighborhood planning, from Plainfield High School site design to laying out a university in Cameroon, Africa, and being in the jungle to avoid the elephant stampede path. So I've had some great experiences around planning for placemaking and planning for people to succeed. I went on my own about 10 years ago. Actually, it'll be 10 years on April 1st this year. So I'm really excited to be marking my 10th year with Zionsville as my primary client. I have 2 other clients in my spare time. I work with a nonprofit organization doing affordable housing. I write their grants in Indianapolis, and I provide some development advice to Marian University. So that's a little bit about me. If you all want to ask me later more, I'm happy to answer more. So, Redevelopment Commission, I serve as their director. I have been their director since August of 22, so a little, about a year and a half now. And the RDC last month changed their standing meeting dates. They now will meet on the 4th Tuesday at 9 a.m. rather than the 4th Monday in the evening. Also, the RDC is continuing to become more sophisticated and organized. One initiative this year is that we will be structuring committees. The last meeting, they created a finance committee. That finance committee had a kickoff meeting this afternoon, and we will be updating our budget to reflect year-end numbers and any specific changes that we need to make going forward. They also have begun interviewing financial consultants that will serve as our municipal advisors for the RDC as we're evaluating incentives and TIF bonds for projects. One critical path forward for any project, if it is considering tax increment financing bonds, is we need financial projections. So they are interviewing 3 firms for that. Coming forward, they'll be looking at a governance committee and a couple other committees. And then finally, I just wanted to update you on Creekside. We are in negotiations with Podell Partners to purchase lots 4 and 5. And we expect for a development agreement to be in place this month. And then lots 10 and 11 is where Graham Rahal Performance Racing is located. If you all have not been past there, take a look because the steel is up. And it's really quite a sight to see how much investment is going into lots 10 and 11. So I'm happy to take any specific questions that you might have for me.
Corey, if 4 and 5 end up coming through, what percentage would that bring the project up to as a whole, Creekside?
Acreage, I don't know off the bat, but I can share with you the remaining lots are 1, 2, and 3, which are all north on the north side of the drive, and then lots 7 and 8. The Redevelopment Commission will be considering letters of intent for all 4, 5 of those properties this month. And then that leaves Lot 9, which is at the corner of Dahlia and 106th. So our goal and the way we have budgeted is that we will have all lots sold by the end of the year.
That's great.
Corey, is it possible that we might need some of that space for some of the development on the South Village? In other words, relocating potential businesses that don't currently fit, in our plans? And if so, is that part of what you're projecting in terms of 100% occupancy or?
No, that would be the lots 1, 2, 3, 7, and 8 would be new buyers. We have taken into consideration conversation with existing businesses within South Village to relocate there so that the road realignment can move forward. We are meeting with Simplicity at next week, and we continue to have good, cordial conversations. I do expect an offer to come through from them.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And you would anticipate that offer on Lot 9?
Yes, sir.
Corey, you mentioned the RDC they met today for a budget meeting. And you mentioned that you're going to hire potentially like a financial planning group. Who pays for that? Where's that money come from?
So a financial planning, a financial assistant is a firm that Crow has served in that position up to this point.
Who pays for it?
Yep. In the past, TIF has paid for it because it is a professional expense associated with a TIF project. Going forward, we have established a reimbursement agreement standard for our development projects, so the developers will be paying for that cost as a part of their project cost. So that RDC will not bear that cost.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, they, circling back to simplicity, last year when this was brought to us, we were told that we would have to do a modification to the PUD in Creekside. Is that still the case with this particular spot?
Yeah, if they choose to move in that location, a PUD amendment would be necessary. The other uses, I don't think we'll need to seek a PUD amendment. However, as we think about the South Village comprehensively, we may look at combining all of it together so that we're getting one solid comprehensive vision for the South Village.
To clarify, when you mean bringing them all together, you mean combining the Creekside PUD with the potential South Village PUD and bringing them all in? Is that what you mean?
Yes, that is
Okay.
the idea.
Okay.
Mhm.
So encompassing the whole area.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Corey?
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you, counselors.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. And that is the administration update. If you don't have any further questions for me at this time, I'll come back later.
I have
Oh,
one
you
more,
do have a
Mayor.
question. Yes, Tim.
And it has to do with the RFQ for the golf course. What is the length of that agreement that you're seeking initially? Is it a year? Is it?
It's open-ended. As stated in the RFP, it's 3 years. But it is open-ended. We, may want to go longer. We may want to go shorter. I mean, I consider this to be an investigative process to see if this is going to be the best way forward for us. We may very well not sign such an agreement and just continue on the way we've been. So it's, it's open-ended at this point.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I'll be right there if you need me.
Thank you. All right. Up next on the agenda would be council updates. Are there any updates from councilors? All right. Moving on, first item on old business is the consideration of an ordinance establishing the Pathways Committee. This is ordinance 2024-02. This is a final reading. We have Mayor Stair here if anyone has any questions.
Just being the person that's on that committee right now, after some talking with some of the current members on the past, I guess, the last year's Pathway Committee, I was just curious if there's any appetite that we could potentially add 2 more people to that that committee by chance. And I guess Mayor Stair, I don't know if you'd be willing to talk about that or have that discussion, or the rest of the council. And I think I understood kind of why we went with the number that you came up with. I just feel like we may lose some valuable resources. 1, 2, the occasional workload that comes with that committee, with the bike-friendly and the walk-friendly applications, is a pretty heavy lift. And I know that when we did it most recently and we were able to get that accomplished, which was great, it was consuming for the majority of us. And I was just going to ask if there was a potential for maybe adding potentially 2 more seats to that, if you had any thoughts against that or for that, or if anybody else had an opinion on that as well. I bring it up tonight because of past conversations. I wish I had brought it up, before it came to the table tonight, but just as it came through, it kind of evolved organically. So
I am agnostic on that. I mean, if you want to add a couple of extra members, I think that's fine. If that's what the council wishes to do.
I think I appreciate that. I think one of the things that, Councilor Melton, when he brought this like a week or so, he made a comment to me about it. And I had a couple of people just in the community, you think about the previous makeup of the Pathways Committee was, I think it was 7 members, all town council appointed. And we had the ability to, if you look at the makeup of those folks, not excluding the ones that are stepping off for different reasons, but we had somebody on the far east side of town, somebody on the far west side of town, and somebody in the village. And I would agree with Councilor Melton's perspective. Like we have to either pull our representation from the east side, the west side, or the village. And if you're open to it, I mean,
Sure.
and I'm fine with you having one and us having one, and we can just modify that on the
Yeah,
ordinance.
that sounds
here.
fine. I mean, I guess I would ask Heather if that means we have to go through a two-step process again since we're changing the
We
ordinance.
do not. So there's nothing in statute that would preclude any additional members. This is a locally derived ordinance, so we're not really following a statute, so that is fine. And you can make an amendment to section 2, I just pulled it up, 2B and 2C, to take that from 2 members to 3 members, and you can still vote it to completion this evening.
Yeah, because, am I correct, there used to be 7 members on the pedestrian mobility as well as 7 on pathways. So we're going from 14 to 5, so I think it definitely makes sense.
Sure.
We're trimming, but we're making sure that everyone's represented, so.
Although I will say this, I do think it's important that the council appointee, the council member that's appointed to it, does serve as that committee chairman, because I think that gives you a stronger pipeline for information back to the full council. So,
Sure.
But as far as adding extra members, I'm certainly in agreement with that.
Yeah, that's great.
Didn't you already have 2 people that had served that you wanted to be slotted in?
I think there was one, well, yeah, there was one that from the current committee on the Pathways Committee, and I think there may have been a recommendation from the other committee, which, of course, they were separate, so I really don't know what they did or excuse me, who it was. But I think there is interest over there, and there's definitely interest from one person that I believe was really an asset that we would lose as well. So, and I think they're from different sides of the town of Zionsville as well. So, Heather, do we make a recommendation tonight?
So you would just.
A motion on that?
You would make a motion to amend section 2, B and C to move the members from 2 to 3.
Before we do, are we in a consensus that town council gets another, mayor gets another? I think that sounds like the best option. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And that's what that motion would do, give each, the town council and the mayor an additional voting member.
So Heather, we need to move the amendment first and then vote it through final reading.
Yes, please.
I'll do it.
Hold on a second.
Let me have a.
So we would, do we have to do, so we just put the amendment in the motion and approve it all, right?
You
Since
could.
we've approved it once already.
You could.
So you just make a motion, whoever wants to approve ordinance 2024-02 with the following amendments.
Sure, that's
Yeah.
also fine.
Go for it, Evan.
Does Craig want to, since it's your.
Great.
committee?
I'll give it a try. I'd like to make a motion to amend section 2, B and C to move those members from 2 to 3 and approve ordinance 2024-02.
Second.
So we got a first by Counselor Melton, second by Counselor Stein. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thanks, sir.
Up next is the consideration of an ordinance establishing the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council. This is ordinance 2024-03. This is also a final reading. Mayor Stair is here if there are any questions.
I have a question. I was approached by someone who said they were speaking for a contingent of people in town based on, there's one part of, I don't have it in front of me, that says the students must attend a high school in Indiana. It might have said Zionsville, Boone County. I'm not sure what it said. In Indiana. And there was a question if that included homeschooling, because it actually says must attend a high school. So I didn't know if we needed to say be receiving a high school education in Indiana versus must attend a high school, so that it could be open to all classes of learners.
Sure. Yeah, if you would like to make that change, I wouldn't be opposed to that at all.
Okay, I would like to make that change,
So
if that's okay.
So I think it says, and a student at a high school in Indiana.
Yeah, and so it would need to be a student
Receiving a high school.
receiving a high school education in Indiana?
Heather, are you good with this?
Yes, it currently reads, all members of the ZMYC must be a resident of the town or of Zionsville, Indiana, and a student at a high school in Indiana.
Because the word
So
at is what threw
yeah,
them.
so I think you would amend it to say, and a student receiving a high school education in Indiana. I think that is a good change. Yeah.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to make that change. So I don't know if I keep going about the whole ordinance or just make a motion to make that change.
Well, we want to approve it too, so you would make
Okay.
a motion.
Approve it with the following
So
amendment.
that would be amending section 3.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to approve ordinance 2024-03 with the amendment in section 3 that reads that the student must be receiving a high school education.
I'll second that. We have a first by Counselor Sampson, second by President Plunkett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. All right, moving along to new business. The first item up is a consideration of an ordinance to amend the Town of Zionsville zoning ordinance. This is petition 2023-27Z. This is the Atwater proposal, ordinance 2024-04. And we have Attorney Matt Price or Mike Dale from the town who's going to present.
Right. National Retail Development LLC is seeking to rezone a 10-acre site with an address of 7250 West Oak Street in Zionsville to a rural general business or the GB zoning district. The petitioner has also proposed commitments that would limit the land uses to a self-storage or mini warehousing facility and professional offices, in addition to committing to several other development requirements which were negotiated with the Stonegate Property Owners Association. The petitioner intends to develop the site for a self-storage facility. If the rezoning is granted, the owner would need to go through the Board of Zoning Appeals special exception process. So wouldn't be a use allowed by right. There would still be another public hearing with public engagement if the rezoning were granted. Last November's meeting, the Plan Commission forwarded a unanimous favorable recommendation to the Town Council with the proposed commitments. The Plan Commission certification and with the proposed commitments and ordinance have been forwarded to you. And I will then ask Matt to present the rest.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. My name's Matt Price, here tonight representing the petitioner. Thank you very much. The PowerPoint has been called up. If I may, I'd like to just briefly take you through the presentation. I can address also some of the comments that we received during the wishes to speak on an agenda item, which we very much respect each one of the comments, those in favor and those who are opposed, because each of them highlighted, I think, important considerations that I would enjoy the opportunity to explain and answer questions about. If you could go to the first slide, please. Just to familiarize you with the property's on the north side of Oak Street. It's kind of enveloped by Stonegate. It's a good-sized parcel. It has nearly 600 feet of frontage along Oak Street. It's slightly over 10 acres. And as has been noted by some of the speakers before me, it's split up among 3 different zoning classifications. So it's a bit of an orphan parcel. And all of us being from Zionsville, we've driven around Oak Street and we've seen this parcel for years. And it has more or less deteriorated over time. But to give you an idea, the front 40% of the parcel is zoned professional business. And that permits things like you might expect to be under professional business, a law office, a doctor's office, things of that nature. It also permits a clinic and apartments specifically at 20 units per acre. The middle section, where you see that star delineating the subject property or identifying the subject property, is zoned R3. As one of the speakers mentioned, that's also a residential district. Contemplates up to 3 units per acre of single-family homes, but also up to 4 and a quarter units per acre of duplexes. So it permits additional residential uses. And then that kind of tail trapezoid up in the upper northeast corner of the property is zoned R2. And that's frankly the way a lot of residential areas are zoned in Zionsville today. I believe it's the underlying zoning district, in fact, for Stonegate. But it's a kind of a mishmash of zoning classifications. One other thing I'll note about the property, because it contributes to some of the challenges with finding the right fit for the land use here and how it interrelates with Stonegate, is that the property is bisected by high tension power lines. You can see down in the lower center portion of the property, those power lines are tall. They're over 100 feet tall. They're the predominant feature on the land, and any land use that goes there is going to have to be kind of tucked around and fit around those high tension power lines. You also will note that Mr. Casey noted during his remarks about how this proposal benefited the association because it allowed it to clean up some of the title and maintenance issues associated with the pond. You can see up in the northwest corner of the property, the pond and shoreline are actually part of this land area by legal description. And so part of our agreement with the Stonegate Property Owners Association is to actually deed them that excess pond property and the shoreline, allow them to take care of those maintenance responsibilities going forward, then also clean up those property line issues for the folks that abut the pond so that they can actually walk to the pond from their backyards without trespassing on land owned by another party. If you go to the next slide. This gives you some indication of what the property looks like today. Just to give you some idea, there's really 3 separate buildings on the property, 2 barns and then what looks to be a former modular home. And these are very recent photographs, just making the rounds. The picture on the upper left is on the western portion of the property, and it's adjacent to the first red barn. The property upper right kind of shows the modular home. You can see homes in Stonegate across the pond from this vantage point. This is looking north. Then down in the lower left is the inside of the larger barn that's on the property. It has fresh fast food packages in it as of today. It looks like people are either hiding in there or using it for some sort of a refuge from the weather, but it certainly appears to be an attractive nuisance. And then in the lower right is actually the view today from the north looking south towards the modular home. That picture is taken probably 50 to 60 feet away from that modular home. It's not an attractive property today, and that was part of the reason why the Property Owners Association was highly motivated to find the right use, the right developer, to do the right thing for Stonegate, and really the right thing for Zionsville. Go to the next slide. This is a picture of what the transmission line looks like. I just wanted to reference that again. Go to the next slide. This is the final site plan that the parties agreed to, and I want to describe a little bit of the process we went through. We had an early meeting with the adjacent residences that live in the section of Stonegate that's called the cottages, which are those homes that you see along the northern perimeter of our site. And we had a meeting at a local hotel conference room. We took them through the proposal, and they gave us feedback, and we incorporated that feedback into our plans. We subsequently met with the Owners Association, and we added additional features. I want to highlight just a few things that I think are really important. One is, you see the buildings that are kind of the arm that stick out northeast. Those buildings are all less than 10 feet tall. They have a square footage that ranges from 2,700 square feet to just under 5,000 square feet. So they're small buildings. And that's by design. They're designed to be low profile buildings. They're not climate controlled. But they sit below the tree line that you see along the northern portion of the property that's going to be enhanced by a robust landscaping treatments. And those landscaping treatments are within a 40-foot buffer that will be preserved between those storage buildings and the homes to the north. We were also asked at the request of the neighbors and the association to further enhance that landscaping so that there was a breakup in the view as you're looking south across the pond. So we added landscaping, as you'll see, north of the building on the very far northwest side. We were also asked to add landscaping along the very far west side of the property where it abuts the existing professional business and have incorporated that as well. Those buildings are very scaled to this location and provide some additional storage opportunities in a Class A manner without putting tall structures against the property line. Now, Building A, as we refer to it, which is the larger building at the front of the project, that's set back a minimum of 108 feet from Oak Street. So it's well set back from Oak Street. It's less than 35 feet tall, so the underlying zoning ordinance permits 35-foot structures. This, at its tallest place, is 34 feet 11 inches, and then it goes down from there to 28 feet. So it's got kind of a slanted roof as you go from front to back. So it's very much in scale for the property and really will be dwarfed by the high tension power lines that are immediately to its south and east. He isn't here tonight, but I've corresponded with him, and I know he submitted a letter in support of the project. Is Mr. Rinke, who owns the property immediately to our east and shares a common boundary with us. We've worked with him on, as you can see in those dark green areas, on some tree preservation and landscaping. He wanted to have a break in that landscaping that you see kind of in the center there, and that was to assure that he had sunlight coming into his swimming pool. It's been very good to work with, and we've enjoyed that collaboration. That gives you an idea of how granular our discussions have been. I'd like to also touch upon one thing because it came up during a couple of the speakers, both for and against, and it really is a very important feature of this project, which is Mr. Wagner mentioned that a key consideration for the association in determining whether to support this or not was whether this project could be separated and delineated apart from and really not be considered part of Stonegate. One of their goals was to preserve the property values and distinguish it from Stonegate, was to really make it separate. And so the way we've done that is by incorporating the landscaping, eliminating a regular access across the drive that extends east-west on our west side of the property, and conveying properties that more rightfully really belong and can be managed better by the association to the association. So the idea behind a lot of this is separating this from Stonegate. You'll notice one of the other commitments is we can't use the name Stonegate. That was important to the association. We respect that. The value of Stonegate, which is a tremendous neighborhood, it's a jewel of our Zionsville community. But a lot of its amenities are central to the development. The meeting house, the swimming pool, the school, those are all central to the development. What they didn't want was a development that would identify with Stonegate or even use Stonegate. For example, if a residential development came in, and by definition, no matter how many homes, and we can debate density all night long, but whether it's 50 homes or 100 homes, once residential users come in there, they're going to cut across Stonegate to go to the school, to go to the middle school. They'll probably try to go to the swimming pool, the meeting house, and they'll need to be able to have access through the east-west drive simply because of the traffic counts associated with that intensive development. The self-storage, by contrast, did not require that level of traffic circulation, for one thing. Our traffic study shows that even at peak hours, we have single trips per hour, even at peak time. That was very critical to the community members we met who did not want to see traffic interfering, for example, with pickup and drop-off times at the elementary school. That is really the thrust and the backbone of why this proposal makes sense. And ultimately, protects in the most practical and long-term ways the property values for the community. I'll mention just a couple other things as we wrap up. Go to the next slide.
Hey, Matt, before you do, I'm just curious. It's my understanding that the access, if you can go back on that other slide, the access to the facility is on the east side. There's no access off Oak.
There is access off Oak. So if you look in the southwest corner, there's a kind of a pie-shaped, that's a right in, right out. And then the access that you'll see that would otherwise be going through cross easement, if you will, up in the center portion on the west side.
Yeah.
That's being permitted only for emergency purposes only. It'll be gated. And what we've worked out with the association is that even the gate entry posts would be constructed to reflect the Stonegate architectural theme. So I guess that's one way maybe there's some similarity between the two properties, but that was a negotiated point and part of our written commitments regarding that. And the reason why this is possible to do is because the traffic counts are so low. There just aren't regular traffic flows associated with self-storage. It's a low-intensity use relative to people coming and going. It's an extension of the home in some ways. This facility, for example, is what they call a Class A facility. We did a market study. Our professionals concluded that there were no Class A facilities in Zionsville, and that in self-storage generally, Zionsville had less than 1/2 the national average. And that's based on square foot per person living in the community. And it makes sense if you kind of think about it. What self-storage is today is a place where people put, for example, store your grandmother's dining room furniture. You're downsizing. You're putting seasonal decorations away. It's an extension of the home. The customer base for this facility, we believe, will be largely female, and those running the home. For that very reason, it has to have the same convenience factors as other services. So it needs to be relatively close to where you live. It needs to be safe, and it needs to be easy to get to and from. And this meets each one of those criteria in a way that, for example, where the crime stories are occurring, that's down on Hannah Avenue and East Street. A very different neighborhood, whether it's self-storage or scrap yards or railroads, a very different area than Zionsville. And when we contacted the Whitestown Police Department on the secure storage immediately west of this property, they hadn't had a single police call to that facility in a year. They had had 2 times when they were ever even at the address, and both of them dealt with traffic violations. So it's just simply not the case that self-storage in and of itself attracts crime. Self-storage in bad neighborhoods can be the victim of crime, but modern day self-storage provides an amenity for homeowners that are seeking to extend the home through an efficient use of storage space. And that's exactly what this is designed to do.
One other just aesthetic question. Along Oak, there's really no landscaping. I know it sits fairly far back. Is that just because of the power lines, or was there some rationale to put, some kind of tree line along Oak?
Well, part of it is power lines, but I will tell you this, it's an excellent question. This was developed primarily in response to the homeowners along in the cottages. What's going to happen as we go forward, and Mr. Dale mentioned this, we've still got 2 more public hearings should this be approved. We have 2 more public hearings to go through. One is to find whether this use is appropriate for this location before the Board of Zoning Appeals. The one gentleman was talking about the property value analysis. The finding that he's referring to is the finding in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals. It's not the finding for the rezoning. That's a subsequent step that needs to take place in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals. We believe we meet that in spades, but that's where that is actually discussed and weighed and where evidence needs to be provided. The rezoning process has a different criteria. But back to your point, Mr. Burke, when we go through development plans, there will be additional foundation plantings for the front of the building. That'll be part of the process as well.
Thank you.
Matt, while you have this up, there was a mention of fence, hopping a fence. How tall is the fence? Is there a fence? I guess there's no fence.
We have you can only enter with a security card, and the climate control building is the front building A. To enter in, if you see the drive that goes along the west side and you turn right, the only way you can enter in through there is through a security card as well. And it's subject to the limited hours that we agreed to. That was part of the Plan Commission, wanted to have restrictions on when anybody could be there. I think what the gentleman was referring to was like down on Hannah Street. I have clients on Hannah Street. I know what Hannah Street looks like. They have fences with barbed wires, and people either cut through them or try to jump over them, whether it's a self-storage facility or what business it is. But there is not a fence surrounding this property.
There's just fences over by the power line. You can see there's a gap.
I'm sorry, if you're, Matt, if you would have him come up to just to,
This
so
is
you're on record.
Yeah, I'll have Mr. Soto introduce himself real quick. Your name and address.
Yep. Hello, everybody. David Soto, 162 West Grand, Chicago, with the Atwater Group. I did want to say there are fences at certain breaks on the non-climate buildings, so you can kind of see where the buildings terminate. There would be some fence. Obviously, we'd meet those fencing standards that would be specific to the city of Zionsville. Obviously, we've been in extensive staff meetings, having conversations as to making sure they have curb appeal and as specific to a height. Again, we'll just, when we get further, if we in fact get down that road, we'll have those conversations as to specific heights that might want to be seen. Just, yeah, it's
The
just
dark
there on
line?
the east side. But you can see kind of right by the power lines, because the power lines restrict really anything you can do under the power lines. So that's by statute of the power lines. The transmission lines have to remain open and unencumbered. And so you can see we have up to the, along that eastern side, we have some fencing, and then you can see just right on the north side of that bigger building A, building B, we have some fencing as well.
So one tie into that is, I noticed that these kinds of facilities tend to flip ownership, and I know you probably can't guarantee how long you're going to own, but I assume the hours of operation will run with the property. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, yes, very good question. Yes, those are part of our written commitments, which will be recorded against the real estate. It's a requirement to have those recorded before we would be docketed even in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Thank you.
Can I ask a very quick question in regards to the residential buffer? Is there a berm that's associated with that planting? I didn't see anything that talked about a berm, but.
There isn't, I'll tell you why. We had some early discussions that were going to include a berm. When we had our arborist go look at the trees, he concluded that to preserve the trees, we needed to do away with the berm, and that was communicated to the homeowners. And the idea was simply that tree preservation trumped ripping out mature trees and putting in a berm.
Okay, so the existing trees that exist within that 40-foot buffer are kind of, they want those to stay in place?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Matt, one more question. What is the proposed assessed value with this? The estimated?
Yeah, it's, we estimate it to be between $6 and $8 million, could be more. Today, to give you an idea, the property is assessed at $227,000 and pays $3,800 a year in property taxes. So it'll be a substantial investment reflecting the quality of the project that's being proposed.
Matt, I got a couple questions. I took some time this weekend to call around to the 7 different self-storage locations that are in and around Zionsville right now. I didn't have any trouble finding space. So my question is, do we need this? You mentioned earlier that a lot of people want self-storage close to their location. There's a facility that's not even a quarter of a mile away. So I'm just interested in knowing what's the need for this? If it was a McDonald's and there was a McDonald's a quarter of a mile away, we wouldn't put another one next to it. So what is the need?
There's a certain amount of seasonality to storage. So calling in February is not surprising to me that they said they might have a unit or two available. If you ask them to hold that unit for you till May, it wouldn't be available. And so the one you're talking about, for example, I know as a matter of fact, would not give you any assurances that there would be a unit available even in the next 90 days. So our survey showed that the storage facilities that are within a 3-mile radius of this site are above 90% occupancy, and that this area is significantly underserved and particularly underserved for Class A, basically non-existent.
In Class A versus Class B, C, I don't know.
Yeah, so what I'm distinguishing that between is there's some references you may have seen in correspondence where folks are talking about self-storage projects in Whitestown, for example. Many of those projects essentially function like flex space for contractors. So they permit outdoor storage. You'll see contractor trucks, FedEx trucks. It's where individuals that own small contracting businesses actually find an inexpensive way to store their vehicles and their equipment. That is not the customer that will come to this facility or that we're targeting for this facility. This is for homeowners that are seeking to have self-storage really close to where they live. I think the closest analogy locally, and we haven't built a new facility in Zionsville for a couple of decades now, is the Zionsville self-storage. That Zionsville self-storage is immediately adjacent to the Village Walk. And I think it was 2005, we had a very similar discussion about the propriety of Village Walk, of that self-storage facility next to Village Walk. And there were issues brought up about property values, crime, alternative land uses for that. And what it's turned out to be is a wonderful success. There isn't crime associated with that. I've got a slide subsequent that'll show that the homes that are closest to Zionsville self-storage actually have a higher dollar value per square foot than homes in the same neighborhood that are not adjacent to that. And it's significantly closer to the property line. It's a few feet off the property line, whereas for example, Building A is in excess of 500 feet away from homes, on the west side of the pond. So it's a significant distance away from those homes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Matt, I have a question. I don't know if it's for you or for Heather, but so tonight we're voting on whether or not to amend the ordinance, the zoning ordinance.
Yep.
And you mentioned earlier that there's 2 steps, assuming we did it, there's still 2 steps, 2 more hurdles.
Yes.
After this that the project would have to go through.
Correct.
What happens if we approve it tonight, and this is for you counselors, and the project decides to go away? Then we're stuck with a rezoned property that could become what?
We thought about that. In fact, well, actually, your staff thought about that, because I'll give them some kudos here. When I first submitted the commitments, we limited the use entirely to self-storage. Staff rejected those commitments and said, for exactly the reasons you're articulating, if this were to get approved, we're stuck with that land use, and you go away, or the use happens, but it ceases sometime in the future. We're stuck. And so what we've done is say, this can be general business, but it can only permit self-storage, mini warehouse, and professional business. So a lawyer's office, a doctor's office, professional offices. That's the only other thing it can permit. So there is so what you would have is 10 acres that could be used for professional office space.
Will we have a time later on in this, Jason, to address some of the people who spoke earlier? Can we ask them questions later or now, or?
Well, I mean, I think we'll probably listen to Mr. Price and then go through questions after that, probably.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You want to go forward? These are the elevations of the property, which shows, for example, the front of the building is what you see at the far right as you're looking from the west to the east. I want to point out just a couple of things, is that The architect designed this in connection with the Walgreens further east on Oak Street to incorporate features of the Zionsville theme. It's a masonry brick veneer and very high quality structure, very much in keeping with the Zionsville architectural standards as expressed in the zoning ordinance. Go to the next slide. This just shows some relative distances of the proposal from some of the adjoining properties and also existing features of Stonegate, which include some land uses that have parking lots and sizable structures that are in relative close proximity to the property itself. One of the things I would note is that we only use 18% of the area for building improvements. So it's not out of scale for the 10-acre parcel. Also, we only use 41% of the frontage. So many of the other buildings in and around Stonegate and the commercial properties that surround the vicinity have larger frontage ratios, and they have those larger frontage ratios because they're significantly smaller lots, relatively large structures on small lots. This is a very large property and being used in a responsible fashion. You go to the next slide.
Matt, that slide, this slide, they're both the same. They've got these, you've got red and green dots on here. Can you share the significance of the red and green dots?
Those are just property owners that had submitted commentary. We were analyzing point of view.
Red is against, green is for?
Correct. I believe that's right. Is that right? We could double check that for you. I believe that's based on emails that we were receiving late last week. Yeah.
I think what did you ask the question?
Red against, green for.
Yeah, I mean, I think based on the emails that I tracked from our packet, that would be consistent.
No, it's not right.
And that's probably updated through Thursday or Friday, so there could be more greens and more reds as well.
Okay, thank you.
Go to the next slide. And there are several comments about property values. One of the things that was noted that this was discussed during the Plan Commission meeting was impact on property values. And there's testimony given during that meeting that notwithstanding the growth of commercial properties all around this property, that property values were continuing to go up dramatically. Stonegate, for example, remonstrated against the liquor store that's across the street. It was in the news at the time. One of the arguments against the liquor store was that it was going to damage property values in Stonegate, and it just hasn't borne out. That's not happened. The appreciation has continued at a very significant rate, and that's in comparative terms inside Stonegate as well as in gross terms across Zionsville's footprint. Go to the next slide. And this is the slide I mentioned about the Zionsville self-storage adjacent to the Village Walk, where we could have picked other examples, but there was basically a trend that on a per square foot basis, homes adjacent to the self-storage building had a higher value than those away from that. And in nominal terms too, very significant appreciation. If you look at the top home, for example, the 2005 assessment, it's fascinating to watch in our community. It's assessed for $156,000 in 2005, and then the last assessment is over $440,000. So very significant appreciation, which I think we've seen really across the community. Go to the next slide. And then I wanted to touch upon the commitments that we made, and this lists out those commitments, and I could draw your attention to several of them, but one very big: we're not allowing outdoor storage of any kind. The western entrance limited to emergency access only. Cannot use the name Stonegate to create that separation. We're promising to adhere to the landscaping package as well as the building orientation. We had a very detailed discussion about on-site lighting and limiting any light spoilage. And we are using wall packs, so we would have lighting equivalent to like a porch light on the buildings that are behind building A. And again, that's basically for security and safety reasons to have that lighting. The one we just discussed about land uses on the real estate, it's limited to self-storage, mini warehousing, and professional offices. I think at one point I said PB, professional business. It's professional offices, so we've tied it down further. So we're not using this as any kind of a way to do housing or anything like that. It's tied to this specific proposal, and then it has the backstop with professional offices. And then, as was discussed at the public hearing, we put in the limited hours of operation as we were requested to do by the Plan Commission. The next slide. And then I just wanted to note a couple of things, since we feel like the hard work we put into this has reflected itself in the fact that we do have property owners association support. We had a 7-0 vote from the Plan Commission, and we had staff support. And these were two things taken out of the staff report, both with regard to the conservation of property values and with regard to responsible growth and development. And it specifically identifies that the commitments do result in a consistent development with its adjoining parcels to the north, south, east, and west. And that was exactly our design. And that's what we did when we worked with the homeowners next door and with the owners association over the last 7-8 months. We started this process in June of last year to get to this point. So for all those reasons, we would respectfully request your adoption of the ordinance. And I truly appreciate the opportunity to present to you tonight in this detail, and would welcome to answer any additional questions you may have. Thank you.
I've got one that's burning on the commitments, number 7, back to the land use. Is it an or is it can you explain to me, I mean, is there a conceptual part of this where you're thinking that there may be a professional aspect to it, or is this just a backup plan?
It's a backup. What the staff was most concerned about, I think, was not that the self-storage wouldn't go forward. Put a big investment in this just to get to this point. The self-storage is going to go forward, barring not receiving an approval. But what they didn't want to have is, if for some reason that use ceased, that there was no other permissible use but for that. And so they asked us to come up with additional uses, and the Mr. Soto and his company were very aggressive in saying, well, we're confident in this and we'll limit it to professional office.
And so by going to rural general business, we're not limiting ourselves from those professional services, because there's an entire rural professional business zoning classification, correct? So
correct.
Is rural general business more encompassing then?
It is. It's far more encompassing. Yeah. It's one of the trick bags that our current zoning ordinance kind of has us all in, which is that the self-storage land use is really not permitted in any other district but industrial districts or general business. And so to get to a point where we can even ask for the special exception in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals and make our case that we're not affecting property values, et cetera, to even get to that point, we had to have the right zoning.
Okay, so I tried to pay attention to some details, but by just driving by and reflecting on moving here 18 years ago, and just being aware of what it looks like today that we're saying is better than moving it forward. So I hear the people that live in Stonegate, and I want to at least address 2 of the topics that I've read through the multiple letters, and I'm pretty sure we all read all the letters, and we really do appreciate both positive and negative people coming here, because we want to make a decision that is best for the town, and not just one of you or I don't think we feel for or against anything. When we walk in the door, we really want to hear from people. So thank you for coming. But I feel like tonight, switching it zoning wise is actually a better move for the town. We're not making a decision against anybody other than looking at what it is now. It's a 2-story pile of dirt view from Oak Street with a lot of weeds growing out of it. And it's been that way for the 18, 19 years I've lived here. So saying that that's a better thing for your neighborhood is a hard point of view for me to take. I think I like Joe's point and the answer you had, that if we approve this, we aren't stuck with this if things end up going ugly or unaffordable for your end of it. The things I've heard from the people that spoke, both positive and negative, that I would like addressed were security and lighting, because I don't want people to feel like their nighttime point of view is now staring into a truth light. I know that you said something about the downward lights and the porch lights, and I appreciate that, so that it isn't keeping them from seeing fireflies or whatever their point of view is. But hand in hand with security is lighting. And so I'm just wondering how we're addressing a dimmer point of view and security.
Mr. So you want to come up? We can talk a little bit about security. But as a, so the wall pack is typically considered the most understated lighting package that's available. Now, we have not discussed and we weren't asked about whether those could be further dimmed after a certain time. We could certainly talk about that.
Yeah, we
put it on a
can.
timer.
Yeah, we can do timers. They can be censored. On top of that, we have cameras that are around the entire facility. So that's all cloud-based. So that's all state-of-the-art in terms of the cameras. In terms of the lighting, we've had conversations with the folks from the cottages. So the idea was that it was always going to be on the inside of the facility, and these wall packs would be casting light down. But obviously, we can have them timer-based, and then we can also have them photosensor-based in terms of any movement or activity. And then obviously, we'd have cameras throughout the entire facility. And then one other thing, just with the in terms of Class A, I think another distinction just that Matt had touched upon is the Building A is climate-controlled building. So Building A is fully climate-controlled, and that accounts for about 77% of the units within the whole entire property. So just something to shed some light on in terms of being modern from a security standpoint, being modern from a climate-controlled standpoint. Those are some of the things that have become retail-centric in terms of where storage is kind of more from the preconceived thoughts of barbed wire to what it is today.
Right. Okay.
And we can augment and agree to augment the comment or the commitment relative to lighting to say that those will be put on timers and a sensor.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're only activated if there's a.
I think that would be really considerate for the cottages if they are looking out, that they aren't looking out industrial, just kind of fit with the theme of what they're seeking.
I would just, a couple of things, Matt. I certainly appreciate the communication with the board and with the Atwater Group and the reconciliations that were made. I don't think that is a altogether common relationship, and this is a unique position, so I certainly appreciate that. This land is currently not owned by the previous developer, correct? The developer of the neighborhood?
Yeah, correct. It's owned by a partnership that includes two Zionsville residents, Bo Leffel and John Demery.
Okay.
But not the Wrights family, you're correct.
So I asked that because obviously I know there's a lot of history with the board and the previous developer. I will say, I mean, I've talked to Heather about this. I live in this neighborhood, so this is something that I'm well aware of the progress of this, and having run through conflicts with council, I'm not in a position to where there's a conflict here, so I want to get that on record. I do want to ask, and maybe Mike, you can help with this, when we look at the special exception from the BZA, there's 3 criteria for the special exception. The proposed use will not be injurious to the public health, safety, comfort, community morale, standards, convenience, or general welfare. The proposed use will not injure adversely affect the adjacent area or property values therein. And the last one is the proposed use will be consistent with the character of the district, land use is authorized therein, and the town of Zionsville comprehensive plan. I feel like those are very arbitrary points for a special exception. So my question is, who decides if it's consistent with the district, and who decides if it adversely impacts the neighboring community?
That would be determined by a vote of the Board of Zoning Appeals. So there'd be a motion by a board member to find that the project meets those criteria, and there would be a conversation about in what ways and how the project meets those criteria, and then there'd be a vote by each board member.
So if the Atwater team shows up to the BZA and says, here's our proof that it's not going to impact home values negatively, and residents show up and say, here's our proof that it will, then we're
And there's a discussion, there's a debate at the board, which testimony has more credibility, what evidence is the petitioner providing to substantiate their claim.
And I guess then the other question would be specific to who decides if it's consistent with the district or the character of the district. There aren't any storage units in the district now. It's my district, so.
Yep, and that would be a motion by a board member saying, I support this project. I believe that this project does meet the character of the surrounding land properties, and it will not harm, property values, and for these reasons mentioned during the meeting. And then there's a vote.
Is that why the Walgreens was brought up, to show the character being consistent?
Yep, that's right. It's whether that character is consistent with the zoning, the underlying zoning district. Right.
So I think obviously haven't been through this, and I was at the meeting that Mr. Price held at the hotel back in July. I think there's a couple things here that we have to remember as council. We are in a little bit of a this proposal is falling victim to timing, right? We are in a spot where we have to do something this evening, because if we wait until the mid-February meeting, it would be 91 days after the Plan Commission meeting. And so that's considered a first reading from the Plan Commission. So we are in a position where we're going to have to do something tonight. I think for me, there's and I shared this with Mr. Price early on in the process. Obviously, from the neighborhood's perspective, we feel like the board is there to represent the membership of the neighborhood. And in looking at the CCRs, that's not the case. The board is there to represent the board and the HOA, not the membership. It's there to keep common areas, provide utilities, services, collect assessments, prepare budgets, share financials, and they've done that very well. I will say this, they've done that very well, and I've been very pleased with the board. I think the disconnect is that the membership was under the impression that the board was representing their wishes. And I think that I asked the question earlier, Matt, about these dots on the site, and I can tell you that those are accurate support and against sites or homes. In fact, I think when I looked at the emails that we received on this packet, out of the cottages, we had 6 people respond. 4 of them were in favor, or 4 of them were opposed. 2 of them were in favor. When you looked at the people who had a view of the property on West Stonegate Drive, where they walk out to that pond, 8 people responded, 7 opposed, 1 in favor. Obviously, the people who don't have a view or their addresses were somewhere else in the neighborhood, there were 7 in favor, 15 opposed. So I think that's where the theme that I get from folks is the concern that they have is if the neighborhood representatives aren't taking the neighborhood wishes in mind, then who does? And I think that from my perspective, that's what I was elected to do. And I held, I shared with Matt, and I've shared with the board as well, that I held a meeting in the neighborhood and listened to a number of constituents. I think one of the things for me personally was getting an email from somebody that was associated with putting this committee together saying, you should look at the people who are impacted the most, the people in the cottages and the people who have a direct line of sight. And I don't disagree with that. And I think that when I look at it, what I see is certainly on the onset, the handful of folks that showed up in July were interested in understanding what was going on. And there were a lot of concerns. And I left that meeting, and I even told one of the residents, I said, historically, when we've had things that come to us, when Matt's involved, you share concerns, and those concerns typically get addressed. So I do appreciate, that activity. But I think from my perspective, as representing the district and representing the neighborhood, it's a hard one for me.
Can I comment? I mean, respectfully, if I may.
Yeah.
I think what has transpired here a little bit is, and there are board representatives here, but to give you an idea of the flavor for that, they formed a committee. They had a representative of the cottages on that committee. They sought out people who were to keep an open mind. They did not seek to put people on the committee who were opposed to it from the get-go without any facts. And that committee and the board unanimously approved the project. They also then put it at their annual meeting, which I'm told over 51 homeowners attended. There's no opposition to it there. A representative of the Plan Commission is also a resident of Stonegate, voted in favor of this. And throughout the process, we were asked specifically about things like view shed, the lighting, the maintenance of the shore and the maintenance of the pond being important from an aesthetic standpoint, the scale of the buildings. All of those things were taken into account that specifically do deal with ownership, not just the concerns of the association from a legalistic standpoint. They were representing the interests of those homeowners. At the public hearing, we had 3 people speak in opposition. We had 2 tonight. It's a community of, well over 300, and I think it was 300, and I've heard varying numbers, but I think it's 365. And there was acknowledgement even at the Plan Commission hearing that some number of individuals are going to be dissatisfied with whatever went there, but that this project represented the best efforts for the community broadly. And I also think there's a little bit of, and I've had this discussion with some of the council members, a little bit of game theory going on here. I mean, it's just part of the process, which is that if it's approved, then they get all the benefits of what we've proposed. If it's denied, then it's the status quo. There's no perceived loss of voting something down like this. But it throws away well over a year worth of work. And I think a project that is truly a low intensity project that affords that separation from Stonegate.
Well, what kind of reception did you get if you threw out that, to put some kind of residential use on there? Did that option or that hypothetical ever get thrown out?
We talked about virtually every option. Obviously, we're representing a self-storage entity, and that entity was chosen as the appropriate applicant precisely because of the low impact.
And that was kind of my question, right? Hypothetically, right? How perceived was apartment complexes, duplexes going to come?
Not well received.
Not well received.
Not well received. Or a clinic, or assisted living, or a compost facility, or an RV parking lot, or mobile homes, all of which are permitted on various parts of the property.
Okay, so knowing that we have to do something tonight, and just bringing some perspective into, which I think is awesome that you respect your district and you listen to their words, because that is what we're here for. But I also listened to my district, and I went door to door and heard from multiple people asking me to help them with their property taxes. And when I mathematically think of how to help Zionsville with their property taxes, I think of economic development and economic development of our 3% businesses. And nobody wants anything in their backyard. I don't either. But this is in a business district area from across the street. And I think that I would be remiss not representing my district by saying my district wants their taxes to be helped out by having businesses in Zionsville.
Well, it's not a business district yet, unless we change it.
But that's what I mean. So that's what we're doing tonight, is just the business district, correct? We're not approving his project, we're approving the zoning change.
That's correct. It would be a change in zoning.
So I move to change.
Well, hold on a second.
That's what, okay, so
We're
I
not-
don't have to, but that's where I am. I'm saying,
Yeah.
I'm not approving the project, but I am approving an improvement in what is good for Zionsville as a whole would be to change our 2-story mound of weeds with the nuisance into a business district that could potentially just be doctor's offices and lawyers' offices. So I don't know if there's other questions, but you said we had to do something tonight, and I hope we're not here until 11.
Matt, it looked to me from the graphic that was put up there that there's about 9 homes contiguous to the property. Are any of those 9 homeowners here tonight, just by show of hand? I'm not going to ask you to speak. 1. Okay. And then you, right across. And then Mr. Johnson lives across the street as well.
All right, hold on. We can't just start shouting out from the audience here.
I was curious by show of hands, and I didn't call anybody to the microphone, but I was just curious of those contiguous, the most affected people, how many were here? Having served on the school board as long as I have, I recognize the value of AV, and I kind of fall where Sarah does, that, it would benefit Zionsville more to have commercial than more residential. That's kind of where I fall. And man, I'm with you. If it were in my backyard, I would be here. And that's why I'm surprised that there's not more here that are directly affected by it. So that's kind of where I am.
I'll just say a couple things. I don't want to make this any longer than it needs to be as well, but I'm a little bit skeptical of talking about the home values of Zionsville have increased and not comparing it to anything else and saying this won't affect property values. Every home in Zionsville has increased in value over the last few years, especially with the time that certain storage facilities have gone in. So I'm not necessarily buying the fact that, don't worry, home values are not going to be depressed. They may be depressed beyond the appreciation that other homes would have if they didn't have a self-storage facility in their backyard. The other part is that I read every one of the letters like Sarah did, and probably all the counselors did. And it seemed like there was a theme amongst those that were in favor of it, that it was the devil that you know versus the devil that you don't. In fact, I saw that comment twice. And I don't know that that necessarily stands up to my level of why we would need a storage facility there. And then finally, the fact that we have an eyesore, and I agree with you, Sarah, I've driven past that for over 20 years, and it's just an ugly part of our town. But I don't know that I can't make the leap in logic to say that because there's an eyesore or an unkept property that, hey, we need to turn that into a self-storage facility. So that's what I'm struggling with, is I just don't see the need, A, and B, if we do end up rezoning it as business and it ends up being professional buildings, I frequent those professional buildings in Stonegate, so I have no problem with that. But I don't necessarily see a need for another storage facility in Zionsville.
Could I address the part on property values?
Please.
That is a specific finding of the Board of Zoning Appeals process. So we're not even eligible to even really make that argument. We're making the case regarding the 5 criteria for a rezoning and successfully did that in front of the Plan Commission anyway. So there is a venue for making that argument, because your points are well taken, and that debate is going to take place the same way it took place with regard to the Zionsville storage facility 18 years ago. And we'll have the opportunity then, I think, to have that debate. And as far as the kind of the devil you know, I think I really can't emphasize enough that a big part of the devil you know was not just saying, well, it's this because it's not that, but it's this because it's to scale and it's very low traffic. And that was a factual underpinning really to the case. And that's what drove this with the homeowners association, with the neighbors who, when we met with them, it was like having a party. It was not a confrontational thing at all. And it was done for, I think, real quality of life issues, which is that it kept having more traffic congestion, people really being brought into the neighborhood when they're not part of the neighborhood. So that's the devil you know argument, which I think is a little bit, I respect what you're saying, but I think there's more to it.
I've got one quick question for Mike, if you don't mind, please. Mike Dale. Mike, so we were talking about facts and about like need of storage facilities and all that. And I know this is really, there's a couple parts to this, but my question is there a self-storage facility being constructed right now off of Indianapolis Avenue in Zionsville? Is there a current project?
I can't recall.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking that there was one in Zionsville, but in an industrial.
Right next to the Little League.
Yeah, that's Zionsville. That's my district, right? So
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's
so there is one being built right there, like a 3-story.
Right by the interstate.
That's a big box, multi-story. It's hundreds of thousands of square feet. That's a facility that is really geared towards serving e-commerce facilities. Is the primary. Again, that's not the same kind of self-storage gets a big umbrella, and from an investment class, maybe that falls into self-storage, but that's really
so
not
that'd be a
what
different class. You said this is A, that would be a different.
Yeah, I think the footprint for that building is around 150,000 square feet. It's multi-story. I mean, it's like a 500,000 square foot warehouse.
How many acres was this?
Our property is 10 acres.
10, and I think that property is 3 acres, right? Something like that. So you're saying?
I don't know.
The only reason I bring it up,
yeah,
Mr. Price, is just about the need when we talked about need. And that's not really the conversation tonight. Really, the conversation is zone change. And I understand that. I just wanted to make sure that if there's a comment that there's not enough storage in Zionsville, which I heard earlier, I would just say that I think that's being, proposed in other areas too. So, but this isn't my district here, but I just wanted to get clarification on that project that's being built in zoning class where it's allowed to be built without coming to the council.
And that's a warehouse in Whitestown. There's not a project in Zionsville that's doing that.
That little sliver,
that
little sliver right there next to the Little League is Zionsville.
I stand corrected. I apologize.
Interesting land markings there.
What's that?
So they just, the way we've carved out our town.
That is the border. Swiss cheese. Yeah. We do have a letter too from our property manager that did the market analysis for us that has the bullet points. If you care to see that, I'm happy to provide it for you. That provides their analysis of Zionsville being underserved by a significant margin, less than half.
I wouldn't mind seeing that at some point. I don't know if you.
Are there any other questions for Matt while this is being handed out? Or comments to Matt?
Just to clarify, Matt, you mentioned that you have done a traffic study on this, and it was, you said low impact, but what were they proposing per hour or something? Is that how they do it by hour of how much traffic they would get?
So to give you an idea, at the peak hour, so an AM, PM peak, it was 1 to 2 trips per hour, which is, I mean,
Meaning
you're not
1 to
gonna
2
see any
people would
land
be,
use
would be
with that
visiting it, right, per
What's that?
hour? 1 to 2 people would be visiting
Correct.
it per hour, so.
at peak. At peak.
At peak?
Yeah.
And right in and right out only, so it's not, I know there's a lot of concern about traffic on Oak Street. And
That is the home run fact relating to this use, is that it's low traffic. Virtually any other land use is going to be higher traffic. You can even see that aerial of the medical office facility that we showed has 25 cars in the parking lot, all accessing off of West Stonegate Drive. And that's just not what you see for self-storage facilities.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Matt or Mike or anyone else? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
I'd move to introduce ordinance 2024-04 on first reading.
To be clear, this would be to approve. You want to modify that?
Okay.
Coming from the BZA.
Move to approve ordinance 2024-04.
Second.
Got a first from Vice President Burke. Who was that down there?
Joe.
Joe. A second by Counselor Stein. Amy, I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind, can we do a roll call vote on this? I still can't hear out of my left ear, so I don't know what's going to happen down here.
President Plunkett,
No.
Vice President Burke,
Yes.
Councilor Sampson,
Yes.
Councilor McElberry,
No.
Councilor Melton,
No.
Councilor Norris,
Yes.
and Councilor Stein.
Yes.
Motion passes 4 in favor, 3 opposed. For those of you that were here for that, if you'd like to you can stick around if you want, or you can head out. Up next on the agenda is a consideration of a salary ordinance amendment. This is for the Welcome Center Coordinator, Police Administrative Manager, and for General Counsel. So this will be ordinance 2024-05. We have Mayor Stair here, as well as HR Director Joe Keel. We've got 3 ordinances here. So you've got 3 ordinances, and that's motion to suspend the rules. Never mind. Go ahead.
I'm here to answer questions. I think I spoke to it before, and if you have any questions before you vote, I'd be happy to take them.
Mr. President, may I ask some questions?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had some questions about this, at least from the funding perspective, just if you could just help break it down for myself and the general public as to, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but $170,000 for that salary, that may be the highest paid person in Zionsville government. Is that correct?
Would indeed be the highest paid person in Zionsville government, but we, as far as the salary level is concerned, we reviewed what our peer communities are paying for such services, and also on the advice of Heather, we have gone and gone through the process of identifying potential people to fill this role, and in speaking to them about their salary needs, we've come to this level of $170,000. By comparison, in Carmel, they are currently interviewing for such a position, and their salary range goes to $199,000. In Fishers, a similarly situated person is making $166,000. In Lawrence, it's $194,000. Westfield just hired their first general counsel at a level of $200,000 a year plus a car stipend. And Noblesville has no one in-house right now as their attorney, and they believe that they're heading toward paying $1 million this year in legal expenses. So that was the peer review. As far as the level, if you want me to go through the breakdown of how we get from $170,000 to the $244,000, it's fringe benefits. And this assumes that the person that we hire will use all of the benefits afforded to them, such as health care and such as, well, I'll go through it. So FICA, adds 13,000 to it. The health plan adds 27,000 to it. Dental is over 1,000. Life insurance and death and dismemberment and those elements add 600 to it. The PERF contribution that we have to make, the Public Employees Retirement Fund, is over $24,000. And then there are a couple of incidental fees, including the 401k match. And again, if this person uses the full extent of their 401k match, that would be a cost of $8,500 to us. So you add it all together, and we get to that $244,609.
Thank you.
John, thank you. First of all, the communication has been spectacular. All along the way, any questions we've had, you've been very, very responsive. I appreciate it. Really, my question is more for the public because you've answered it for me already. But I have had constituents asking these questions.
Yes.
And it was primarily just to have you give a sense as to how things would be different with an in-house counsel versus a counsel that was retained. You mentioned the fact that things might be more efficient. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you expect to be the improvement in our legal counsel as a result of this move?
I think it would be extraordinarily more efficient. Everything that we do in the town has a legal component. And I, as the executive, I'm not going to sign a contract. I'm not going to sign a document that doesn't have legal review. And our department heads follow the same protocol. Municipal law is a distinct area of the law. And having somebody on site that's dedicated to us is going to be far more efficient than calling an outside counsel and waiting until we can get an answer back. The outside counsels have other clients that they're serving too. We would have somebody dedicated to us, for their full time. And I just think it certainly Zionsville has become big enough and has become complex enough that we certainly have plenty of work for an in-house counsel. And Heather looks like she wants to speak to that.
I was just going to mention a couple of other points. So I've been working with the mayor and the deputy mayor on this, and on salary wise, I will tell you there's a trend with government employees from a legal counsel perspective to incentivize a higher, more experienced person to take the job, which is the only way you're going to alleviate the need to use outside counsel. You've got to pay more in the marketplace. So we did look at a number of communities, and we also looked at state government to who we might bring into the role. So to be able to balance that experience, you are having to pay more than you traditionally see in a government employee role, including at the state level where the legal counsel makes significantly more than a governor, for example. The other thing I would note is the mayor talked about delays. We've been doing this work with the mayor over the last month now. It feels like more than that, Mayor. Bringing someone in, a matter in, for example, and I can think of countless examples of this. If there's any adverse party, then private legal counsel has to check for any conflicts of interest. That slows down the process of being able to timely review and respond. I've got to go get consent if there's a consent requirement for a client. We just had one recently with a utility, somebody with a utility contract, for example. So we've got to make sure we've got advanced consent, and we've got to review that. So it does slow time. I will also say that this is something candidly that was discussed all the way back to when Mayor Hawk was here, just because the needs of the town has just grown so much. And we've talked a lot about being able to utilize your outside legal counsel very strategically. In my opinion, the best use of outside legal counsel for day-to-day operations in a city or town are finance work, economic development, litigation, employment matters that are, beyond the sort of scope of the day-to-day routine employment matters. So I will say there was a lot of thought and benchmarking looking at this as it went forward, and I am definitely supportive. I think it'll be a good move for the town long term. Not to work myself out of a job, but it is a good idea. So
the only thing I would add is having been in the law firm industry for 15 years, Heather, you can attest. And we're going to get somebody that's got vast experience. I bet Barnes and Thornburg is taking a kid straight out of college for more money than what we're talking about here.
We're pretty close.
Yeah,
We're pretty close.
with no experience.
Yeah.
I would also point out to council, and I've shared this communication with Mayor Stair and Heather as well. It is important. I know that the administration has a desire to go a single legal representation route. We have Heather, so there will be two, right? I mean, it's important to, until we can work together and feel like we're all comfortable going that route. The legislation we had passed in the DLGF bill last year allows for the town council president to enter into agreement for their own representation, and we'll continue to do that until we come to a logical conclusion or something else.
And I was just going to share the reason that we went the route, working with the mayor, of asking for an additional appropriation for the full amount. The mayor mentioned there's already an allocated amount in the budget, is because in the last budget cycle, there was no contingency for legal put in the budget. And I will share with you, there will always be contingency needs that come up. You're always going to have an employment matter. You're always going to get sued. So we felt like that was a more transparent way of doing this versus trying to offset and then come back for additional legal spend later in the year.
So will we have a budget for contingencies in addition to the 240,000
Yes.
for this person? And then I guess my next question is, I think I asked you this, but I just want to, for the record, this is not a head of a department.
This is not creating a new department.
This is
no.
not a new
This is
department. It's
bringing
not
another
legal
employee.
department or anything.
Correct.
And then my last question, I appreciate that. But my last question is, will this job, be posted for like equal opportunity employment where anybody can apply for this? Or is this, we already honed in on the people that are talented enough, I guess, or have that special.
Under Heather's advice, we've been going through the process of identifying and interviewing candidates. We have several candidates that we think are very viable candidates for this position. So if you were to approve it tonight, I think we could have somebody on board fairly quickly.
Fairly quickly? Okay.
John,
Yes,
how
sir.
many employees does the town have, roughly?
What are we, about 250 now? Right about 200. Okay, right about 200. Seasonally, in the summer, we have more when the needs are greater. We have seasonal employees.
I was just going to urge the fact that I can't think of many companies out there that probably have 200 employees and don't have somebody that's a dedicated legal in-house representative that's there day to day helping with employment matters, contracts, things like that. I mean, I've talked with the mayor extensively about this, and I deal with general counsel pretty frequently, almost daily. They've got a lot of plates in the air, but they're also a great resource. And tend to think sometimes that maybe the legal battles of the past 4 years maybe could have been avoided had there been somebody dedicated in house to help simmer down tensions and things like that. So.
For the record, can you just, thanks, Evan, by the way.
You're welcome.
For the record, can you, as it pertains to the budget, and you may be better suited, but with the addition of this position and in relation to the fact that we're going to have legal spend, the impact compared to budget, are we forecasting this to exceed budget? Is there a number for the record that we can kind of come out with just in general?
I'm not sure I understand the question. If you're asking if we have money in the budget for this, I believe we do. I believe we can afford the appropriation, but
that's kind of where I was going. Is this going to?
I mean, I think if you look at the number at 244, knowing that we had 184 initially earmarked for legal, and to Heather's point, there's always additional legal expenses and contingencies and stuff like that. I mean, I think I don't want to sell your idea for you, but I think the money's there just by way of what was already in the budget and what we have historically spent in legal fees in the past.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your help as an appointment, but and let me say further, the last few years we've had an attorney on retainer in the administration for $15,000 a month. You've had Heather on retainer for a similar amount. So you add that together, and that's $360,000 a year just for the retainers that we have been paying. So I think that this represents cost savings and will continue to represent a more efficient way to do our legal services going on into the future.
I'm with you on the efficiencies. I don't know that this is a cost savings, but that's okay. I'm with you on the efficiencies for sure.
Quick
Well, I
question for
appreciate that.
Heather. So we're in that process where you've done several updates to our codes. Are we going to continue to keep that on our side? Or are we going to bump it over to the new attorney side? What's the thought process?
I think I've talked with President Plunkin about it. I think it will be a bit of both. I think we'll continue to take the lead on those updates and working with the new council when they're onboarded. Originally, we had money budgeted for the mayor's council and for the town council for that project. We didn't spend a lot of that money, just we weren't getting very far with a lot of vetoes at the end of the year. So we just kind of put everything on hold and waited, for the new administration to onboard. So we'll bring that back. We'll probably have to do that out of contingency or do an additional appropriation once we kind of resize what the remaining work is.
Great, thank you.
And may I repeat just one thing? I said it before, but I want to repeat it again. I think that asking you to suspend the rules is not something I take lightly, but I am asking in this case that we could suspend the rules tonight since we have all 7 council members here to consider approving this tonight instead of, waiting a couple of weeks for a second read.
Yeah, and I was just going to say I recommended that as well, just because there are 2 really good, strong, viable candidates, and I would hate to see one of those candidates go elsewhere just because of timing. So it would be something I would strongly recommend as well.
Can I ask just a real quick, this is a procedural question that will be actually a little bit later on, but maybe ties into this suspending the rules. Are we required to publish this in 2 publications, the additional appropriation? Is it just 1 or 2?
One publication of,
We really only have one.
yes, because we only have one publication of general circulation. I think you can only post it in 1.
Okay.
Meaning the town of Zionsville only has 1 newspaper in general circulation that regularly circulates.
And is that the Lebanon Reporter or the current, the Lebanon Reporter?
Okay. Actually, for what it's worth, the reason I asked it is because it looks like I've got 2 for
The other one?
The same one.
no, 2 for the grant writer and 1 for general counsel. If that doesn't matter, then it doesn't matter, but
They're both the same thing, and I just have them all stapled together. They're both from the
okay. All right, so same numbers on this one, not that one, so. All right. Any questions for the mayor on ordinance 2024-05? I would make a motion to introduce on first reading ordinance 2024-05.
Second.
Second by Counselor Norris. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. I'll make a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
Second by Counselor Norris. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. And I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance 2024-05 on final reading.
Second.
Who was that? Second by Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you. Up next is a consideration of a resolution authorizing the acceptance of an easement. This is for the Aldi and Crew Car Wash. This is Resolution 2024-04. We have Mike Dale, Director of Community and Economic Development. Also Catherine Rayner, Development Project Manager for Crew Car Wash, or Travis Smith, Director of Real Estate and Development for Crew Car Wash.
Right, in your folders, you should have a resolution in front of you that would authorize either the mayor or the director of community economic development to sign this easement agreement that's in your package. And we do have a representative from Crew Car Wash here if you have further detailed questions about this transaction.
My detailed question would be, we were told that you were willing to maintain the roads, or the road center. Is it going to be called Center, or is it just a non-name road?
I think it's called Center Drive.
Okay.
Is the final name.
And your company is going to maintain it?
Yes. Yeah.
Any other questions for counselors?
So maintain it like the asphalt or the snow removal, everything?
Yes, everything.
So that's not a county responsibility?
Right. Basically, the discussion with the city was that it would be constructed and maintained in a manner similar to a public road. There were technical reasons why it couldn't be dedicated as public right away. We're not purchasing the property, we're leasing the property. And it got really complicated if it became public right away. So part of the resolution was we agreed that it would be constructed in a similar manner to a public road and that we would maintain it in the exact same way. Yes.
I'm sorry, real quick for the record, are you Travis?
Yes. Yeah, I'm not Catherine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you just state your name for the record?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Travis Smith, Director of Real Estate for Crew Car Wash. Thank you.
Travis, where will the entrance be? I'm looking at the plot plan right now. I can't really tell. Is it going to be off Center Drive?
The access to the main, I don't have a site plan in front of me. The Center Drive aligns with the property directly to Center Drive aligns with the property to the east.
Center Drive goes behind Big O Tires and
Yeah, so the big
Taco
tires
Bell.
over here. There's also a drive on the other side.
Evan, will you put your microphone in his face, please?
Sorry. Yes, the main access point on Roll runs here. This connects to behind the Discount Tire. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yep.
Any other questions for Travis? I will make a motion, having no other questions, I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2024-04.
Second.
A second from Counselor Sampson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you, Travis.
Thank you.
All right, up next is a consideration of a resolution regarding the appropriation of additional funds. This is for General Counsel. This is Resolution 2024-05. I'm actually gonna, we've obviously heard from Mayor Stair. This is a public hearing. I approve of publication of the notice of public hearing. At this point, I'll open the hearing. If there's any members from the public who would like to comment, having none, I'll close the public hearing. Are there any further discussions or questions? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2024-05.
Second.
I got a first from Councilor Norris, a second by Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a consideration of a resolution regarding the appropriation of additional funds. This is for the contract grant writer. This is Resolution 2024-06. This is also a public hearing. I approve publication of public notice of the public hearing. At this point, I will open the public hearing. If there's any members of the public who would like to comment, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, I would
I have
call
a
for a
question.
motion.
I have a quick question for John, or Mayor Stair, sorry. I just want to clarify, because my brain got a little switched with, is the 60,000 for the entire year, or was it for a 6-month?
It's for a 6-month trial.
Okay, so I had concerns about the annualization of that salary into 120,000 for a grant writer.
It would not be that. It's $5,000 a month is the contract that we have for 6 months. And at the end of that 6-month period, what I talked about is that we would reevaluate to see how successful it's been. At the end of that 6-month period, we could either continue on the way we are for the year, which would bring us to that $60,000. We can change the ordinance to make it a full-time position, or we could let that person go and not have a grant writer anymore. So, I think to me, it's an open question, and we'll see, how things go over the next 6 months.
Okay, so it is just 5,000 for 6 months, so,
$5,000 per month for a 6-month period.
okay. I just that's where I got my mind going, wait, is it 60 for 6 months? So I think I was.
Yeah, I have a similar question, honestly.
Sure.
I mean, I get that that's for 6 months, then you can make decisions after that. I know obviously there was a lot of data shared around general counsel and cost. What would be, if we decided to go full-time and have someone on board, what's the typical going rate for a grant writer? Is it a 6-figure position?
That's a good question, and we haven't looked into that because we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. If we decide in 6 months that we want to make this a full-time staff position, at that time, we'll do that peer review and we'll do that due diligence and get you that information.
How did you come up with the 5,000 per month? Just, I've had members of the community reach out to me and say that seems like a very high number for grant writing. So.
Well, considering that a grant writer could bring in, really significant amounts of money to the town, it may end up being a bargain. I mean, I think $5,000 a month for a 6-month period, a total of $30,000 from the food and beverage tax fund, I think is a reasonable amount because what we could gain from that is so much greater and so much more.
Go ahead.
One last. So why are we approving 60,000? If it's just for this year, shouldn't it take off like the month that it's already happened?
Well, Heather, maybe you can help me out with this. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we put in 60,000 as the high amount that you would see if we started the position right away. Obviously, we're now into February, so you could take that down. When you post an amount, you can reduce it, you can increase it. So if the council would like to set amount taking out the $5,000 for January, for example, you certainly could do that. Or if you wanted to do it for the 6 months, you could go down to that amount and then at the 6-month mark, come back and revisit. I think the thought was just to give as much flexibility throughout the year in that line item.
So that scales to the year rather than the 6-month period.
Yeah. I think I'm just stuck on the amount of people that reached out to me and told me they thought that was too much.
Well, keep in mind that this is coming from the food and beverage tax fund. This is not coming from the general fund. The food and beverage tax money is to be spent on economic development. And I think this is a clear economic development benefit.
Right.
To the town.
Money's money to me, so I understand it's in a fund, but I don't know. That's just where I stand. I think it's a lot of money. I have a friend who I went to her directly because she is a grant writer for IU Medicine, and I asked her on the pricing, and she said, does this person have 10 years experience in grant writing? And so it just got me thinking, could you tell, and I didn't want to point blank say to her, how much do you get paid? I thought that was a little invasive, but I said, is this person going to make more than you? And she said, on an annualized basis, yes. And she's been writing for the IU School of Medicine. That's all she does full time, and she doesn't make that much. So I thought that was applicable to bring up tonight, and also had another person reach out to me from the Boys and Girls Club saying that they thought it was a larger amount than other people have written. So it's just, it's numbers. I'm the numbers girl. So if this doesn't make anyone else bothered, then it doesn't matter what I'm saying. But I did want to at least voice what my constituents had come to me and said.
I like the idea of having a grant writer on staff. I think to your point, there's a lot of ROI for the town. We've seen that with a lot of grants over the last few years. I'd be surprised if we didn't want to make this a full-time position. If we did, right now you're saying the dollars are coming from food and beverage. If this became operationalized for 2025 and beyond, would it still remain funded from food and beverage, or would it not become an operational staff expense?
Well, I think that's up to the council and what you would choose to appropriate from the food and beverage tax fund. As you know, you're the fiduciary body. I'm not, so I could make that recommendation. You could either choose to approve that or not approve that. I think, there are a lot of different ways we could go with it. And I think that hopefully it will become apparent at the 6-month interval and also at the end of the year what the future of this should be. I do know that all of my department heads have told me that they see grant opportunities coming through all the time. And, they have to decide, are they going to spend time away from their, normal day jobs to try to pursue something that may end up being a dead end, or it may end up being great, and they may end up bringing a lot of money into the town, but you just don't know that. So I think having a grant writer that can work across all departments and help them better manage their time, I think is an important element that we can add with this. And in all these grants, you have to have certain data. So we're going to build a database of that data, our population, our, geographic location, demographic breakdown. All those things go into this, and it's picking and choosing the right elements to apply to the grant that you're applying for.
I'm just saying, I'm trying to think long term. Once we put our foot in the water on this, we're probably making a commitment as a council. I'm trying to think through how that might be funded moving forward. I'd hate to have someone start at 6 months and then, assuming things are going well, have to hire someone else and maybe not keep the person that we have on board. And
right.
They're going to be used to a particular salary, or that's the kind of person we're going to attract at $5,000 a month. And if we cut that in half, you're probably not going to maintain that person. So I'm just trying to think through the sustainability of the decision. I fully agree that we need this.
And I just want to make sure I reiterate, I think it's a great path to take. I do think we can benefit as a town with a grant writer. I've said it before, I'm on multiple sides of grants. I understand the work that goes into it and the importance of the writer. And it might be because I'm coming from a volunteer point of view. I do this stuff for free. So it's hard for me to jump to such a large number. And maybe it's not large. I don't know.
I think when you consider...
Sarah, I don't want to interrupt you, but real quick. I mean, if you're talking $60,000 versus $48,000, it's kind of splitting hairs from a financial standpoint. At a budget our size, it's an immaterial nominal amount. Secondly, I can tell you from firsthand experience, a good grant writer is worth their weight in gold, and a bad grant writer isn't worth the 60 or even 20. And so we have and then the third thing that I'll throw in before I say my next point is, it's a pilot, right? So there's a lot of extra work that goes into, as John said, building the database and acquiring the information that they need to be able to write good grants. We're in the catbird seat because we're going to be able to look at the quality of work. And if we find a quality grant writer, they're going to pay for themselves in spades. And it's going to be just a non-issue. And we're going to be high-fiving ourselves that it was the greatest move we ever made. So if it's the dollar amount, I think that reducing it by anything, I just think we'd be making a mistake. I think 60,000 is fair. We're going to know very quickly whether or not we have got talent or we don't have talent. And if we don't have talent, we can move on. And if nobody's successful in that role, then we can strike it all together down the road. And I think John's going to be a good steward of the dollars to make that determination for himself.
And I would point out one more thing, Councilor Sampson, that they're working across a multiple number of departments, up to 8 departments that they're going to be writing grants for. So it's not just one targeted thing. It's not just parks. It's not just public safety. It's all of it. And I'm very hopeful that this is going to be a net gain for the town.
Mayor Stair, I just have one question, and it's the definition of part-time versus full-time. Are we referring to this as a part-time position because it's just for the 6-month period?
Yes.
Okay, but are they expected to put in 40 hours a week? Like, how are we defining part-time? And then I guess my other question is, what expectations have we built around this? Is this person going to have expectations in terms of bringing in a certain dollar amount? Or is it just basically, hey, do what you can, let's see what we get out of it? I'd just like to see that maybe tightened up a little bit.
We're hiring this person as a consultant.
Okay.
So there are no fringe benefits that go along with that. And I'm more results oriented than I am, guiding the form of how it takes place. So if this person will work 20 hours a week or 60 hours a week, it's up to them.
Okay.
I just want to look and see what the results are at the end of the day.
And how are we determining whether those results are adequate or we aren't comparing it against anything at this point because we don't have a grant writer, but.
Right. I don't think there are benchmarks. You know, I think at the end of 6 months, I think we're going to know whether this is successful or not. You know, just taking a very objective look at how much money we brought in through grants that we may not have otherwise been able to realize without having this position. I think we'll know.
And are we defining that as new grants versus ones we kind of already been able to achieve?
I don't think it matters. I mean, I think we're missing the point here. It is a pilot. The average grant writer in the state of Indiana makes about $67,000. Top earners $82,000. I mean, we can find. I mean, this is not. I don't believe this to be out of the outside of the parameters of the ask. I also think if you talk to department heads about how much time they do spend on it, freeing up their time to give them the opportunity to do things with what's really relevant and making sure, you know, public safety is taken care of, streets are taken care of. Like I certainly free up time, and time is money. So
I also see a lot of benefit from the bike-friendly community, the walk-friendly community.
you don't have to do it anymore.
Having that compiled. So this is a great idea. You know, I just want to make sure that, you know, public service versus stimulating the economy. You know, when we look at that 2% tax, you know, I'd hopefully, if this works, that we maybe dive into a budget item as opposed to taking from that pile of money. But this is great. You won't get me to say, well, we didn't do it that way before, because I'm not giving you any money in that bucket. But this is a great idea, and I think 60 grand, it is what it is. It's a pilot. So I'm excited to see us moving in a different direction.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mayor Stair? Otherwise, I would make a motion to approve Resolution 2024-06.
Second.
Second by Councilor Stein. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you. All right, coming down the home stretch here. Last thing on the agenda is the 2024 annual certifications of compliance with the conflict of interest and nepotism policy. There is no vote here, councilors. Amy's passed out some information. Go ahead, Amy.
This is just to comply with state regulations as well as our town's ordinance regarding conflict of interest and nepotism. That would be ordinance 2023-30, which was included in your packets, along with the forms. All the council members must complete compliance with the town's nepotism policy involving direct line supervision and the compliance with the contracting with the town by a relative policy. And you all have those personalized forms in front of you right now. Those must be completed and submitted on an annual basis. The uniform conflict of interest disclosure statement, that only needs to be completed if there is a conflict of interest involving financial interests connected with any contracts or purchases of the town of Zionsville. So that one you probably don't need to fill out, but if you do have a conflict, fill that out, and that one would be required to be submitted as soon as you realize you have a conflict. So that's it. If you would just please complete those, fill those out, or sign those, and get them back to me.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks.
Other matters? Are there any other matters from councilors? Otherwise, I would make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Councilor McElderry. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. The next regular town council meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, February 20th, 2024 at 7:30 a.m. in the Zionsville Town Hall Council Chambers. Please note the shift in dates due to the President's Day holiday. Public notice will be posted in compliance with the Indiana Open Door Law.